Please welcome Brian Lauer.
Thank you so much. All right. I don't know. And what caused the inland seas? This is going to answer a lot of questions. You know, what happened there? What formed these lineaments? Okay, how do you fuse past iron? That's all going to be covered, and going more in depth, Brian Nickel, and the origin of radioactivity. It's very interesting. Okay, keep in mind granite, which is the bedrock for the continents, is made of 20% quartz. It also has feldspar, mica, and hornblende in it, but quartz is the key because it's piezoelectric. If you stretch it or compress it, it's going to make a spark. That's what I think gas grill lighters are of. They're hitting that quartz and it sparks. And what's going to put pressure, stretch it or compress it, is when those big continents were fluttering. You know, when they were fluttering, water's going, you know, water's building up pressure and it's fluttering. And they've noticed that there's an electrical charge during earthquakes. This is what's been documented. You know, flames shot out of the ground, intense electrical activity. The sky was alight, ribbon-like flashes of lightning. Bluish flames from fissures opened in the ground. Anchor chain became incandescent and partly melted. So there's some electrical activity going on inside this granite during these earthquakes. And so it's fluttering, it's going up and down depending on the pressure, and it's slamming down, causing that Z-pinch, and we'll talk about the Z-pinch later, but it's causing a lot of pressure on the granite hitting the basalt, and it's causing that spark-like thing, which could melt the granite, and it forms these chondrules, and they go down to the end, and when it finally does open up, they get shot up into outer space. That's how we get the chondrules in space. Okay, and it just keeps on going, and when that's happening, you know, there's a lot of a lot of neutrons going on there, because when lightning hits the ground, the air kind of expands and slams together and we get the thunder. Now just imagine lightning inside of a granite. It can't expand, but it's going to slam back together. And they have this thing called Z-pinching, where you get a pure electrode material and you hit it with something going close to the speed of light. It can make 94 elements and super heavy elements. And it's radioactive, so they're unstable, so they go up and then they decay into that valley of stability. And so what's happening inside the granite is there's a lot of plasma flow, there's that expansion. It's going to take those 4 atoms and they're going to slam them into one, making it radioactive. And then again, this is just briefly, if you want more, Brian Nickel has all the math and the physics, and it's just interesting to think about. And that's why, you know, we don't find radioactive material in the ocean. And why is it? Mainly by granite. And so with all that heat and radioactivity going on, it's going to make the crust weak, and it's just going to explode out of there. That's how you get them inland seas, I think. And I think Lake Superior might even be one of them too. I don't know. But so there's a lot of radioactivity. There's a lot of free neutrons. And what did we need in deuterium? We needed an extra neutron. That's why the comets have, their ratio is 1 to 3,200. The ocean is 1 to 6,400. And why is that? I think it's because the ocean diluted the water that was coming up. So just food for thought. And why do comets have stuff from Earth? The water, the salts, the silicates, limestone, clay. Limestone needs to be made in water, by the way. Cubonite, that's the scalding stuff. Olivine, iron, nickel, organics, amino acids, bacteria, cellulose. That's wood. How does that happen? We had Kevin Lee talk at a Creation Club this year too, and he talked about the origin of limestone. And they had this thing called the Stardust mission. They were going to get what's in a comet and bring it back to Earth and see what's in it, so they could see the building blocks of the universe, or the Earth solar system. And he said, you're going to find stuff from Earth. And he talked to the guy, you know, and it's really interesting. He listened to him in his own words. And so how did he know that? Well, some of the stuff, not only was it getting past our atmosphere, it got past our gravitational pull and just kept on going. And so you get the water and the dry ice and the mud going together, forming comets. And that's why the short-term comets, 93% of them are going our way. So if you were, just imagine you're on a train going 100 miles an hour, and you throw something out that's going 50 miles an hour, okay? It's all going to be going the same direction. Even if you threw it out backwards, you're going 100 miles this way and 50 miles that way, it's still going to keep going that way. That's why the short-term comets are mainly going our direction. And then if you threw it out at 150 miles an hour, well, yeah, now you're going to get more that can go the other way. And if you throw it out at 500 miles an hour, now you're getting pretty close to a 50-50 mix. So that explains it. How did asteroids get moons, which is really hard? And how do these things come together gently? Their theory is it should all break apart. But if they're all flowing together from the same place at the same speed, they're going to start to get attracted to each other. That's how you could get a moon. That's how you could get those peanut-shaped asteroids. And they've even found rounded boulders on a comet. You know, Comet 67P, rounded boulders. What made the river rock? It was going through a flow of water, right? If something breaks apart in space, it's going to have jagged edges. How do you get something rounded in space? Had to be going through a fast flow of water, breaking off the sharp edges and getting shot into space. And so then how do you get, and Walt Brown predicted that, rounded boulders. How do you get these water canyons on Mars where there's no liquid water? Well, there's a lot of the water that went up to Mars and it's in the soil there and it's frozen in the soil, and if it gets hit by an asteroid or a meteor or something, it's going to generate heat and that water is going to melt and it's going to flow out, giving you the canyons. Okay, so now if this really happened, would it leave a mark on the moon? And the answer is yes, and it did. That's why the near side is pounded and the far side isn't. They had a rock just got released within the last 5 years. It's from the moon. They kept it hidden for 50 years. This was a rock that they picked up on the moon, and guess where the rock came from? It came from Earth. It must just be covered with rocks from the Earth up there. And they didn't release it because they couldn't explain it. It just ties it together, and these are some of the theories that, or some of the predictions that he's made, and we'll just go through the ones that are right. Okay, it was verified. Pooled water under mountains, deep channels under Bosporus and Gibraltar, salt on Mars, asteroids are flying rock piles. Okay, rocks on asteroids and comets are rounded. How in the world would he know that? You know, water inside large asteroids, carbon-14 in old bones, and then this one too. NASA discovered Earth-like compositions of comets, fulfilling his other prediction. How did he know what was in it? Because his theory explains how it got there. You know, is it very good to have a comet that's going to come and destroy it? You know, and hit the Earth? No, there couldn't have been comets and meteors and stuff that was going to hit the Earth before the fall. You know, everything was very good. And so this explains why there's explains a lot of it. And so one of the objections, well, the objection that I got from the professor, and there are a lot of them, and what's neat is it's all on one site. It's all on rsr.org. You can hear what the objections are to it. But what did the professor say about this? I don't believe the assumption. I don't believe there was water, half the ocean was inside the Earth. I don't believe there was water inside the Earth at that time. She didn't believe it. And my response is, why not? There's water inside the Earth right now. You get these deep smokers, these black smokers. This is hot water, super hot water coming up from the bottom of the ocean. Where does it have to come from? It has to come from below that. And there shouldn't be water below 5 miles, because when granite is under 5 miles of pressure, it kind of turns it into putty, just seals off everything. Water shouldn't be able to get through. Okay, but they dug down. In Germany and Russia, they got below 5 miles, and guess what they found? Crushed granite with water, just like the hydroplate would predict. And so if you want to get more information, I encourage going to rsr.org/answers. And these are answers to some of the objections. And even the objections themselves are published here. Wouldn't it be neat if the evolutionary textbooks would publish, have a list of published objections, so then you can see both sides? But that's what RSR does. Real Science Radio does. They want you to have all the information, and then you think for yourself. And then they answer them on the radio. Really good. Brian Nickel does such a great job with that. And for most of Walt's life, he was an evolutionist, but then he became a creationist based on the evidence and based on some of the Bible. There's verses in the Bible that validate what he's saying. To him that stretched out the earth above the waters, that's Psalm 136:6. The earth, yet all the inhabitants thereof are dissolved. I bear up the pillars of it. Selah. That's the pillars. It's where the granite and the basalt are touching. Psalm 75:3. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the host of them by the breath of his mouth. He gathered the waters of the sea together as a heap. He layeth up the depth in storehouses. Isn't that interesting? That's Psalm 33:6 and 7. And then, for he hath founded it upon the seas and established it upon the floods, Psalm 24:2. And then the one that we talked about earlier, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up. So water came gushing out of there, and now catastrophic plate tectonics, they'll say that fountain was lava. And they're really grasping at straws for that. And what they're doing is taking a secular model and speeding it up. And so if you want to learn more about that, Jane Albright does a really good job explaining. And who shut up the sea with the doors as it broke forth, as if it had issue out of the womb, Job 38:8. And it just shot out. You know, when you have a baby, water breaks and it just shoots out. And then this is Psalm 104:5-9. The waters stood above the mountains. At thy rebuke they fled. At the voice of thy thunder, they hasted away. Could you imagine what it sounded like when the mountains were forming? And this is a psalm about that. They go up by the mountains, they go down by the valleys to the place which thou hast founded them. And some people say, that's the creation week. But keep reading. Thou hast set a bound that they may not pass over, and that they turn it not again to cover the earth. No, this is the flood. This is what happened during the flood. And then in Job, it talks about how thou entered into the springs of the sea. Scientists didn't know there were springs in the sea until 1977. And yet thousands of years ago, that's what Job's writing. And also Jonah went down to the bottoms of the mountains. I mean, why would somebody write, if the Bible's written by man, why would they talk about mountains in the ocean? Who would know? And so it just is strong evidence for God's word being true. And, we're going to, and at rsr.org/HPT, this is what we're getting back to. There is a reason why you've never heard of it. And it's a sad commentary on Christianity. And if you want to learn more about that, go into rsr.org/HPT, Walt Brown controversy, and listen to Jane Albright explain. You know, she critiques all the flood models, and then she talks about the Walt Brown controversy. And I have so much respect for what he's done, and I just want him to get the credit. So if you're interested in that, check that out. And then if you want to see the documents that they're talking about, you know, sometimes science advances one funeral at a time, right? Like the guy who said the scablands came from a glacier flood. He was ridiculed by his peers. And then those peers died, and then now he gets the credit. Okay, and there's power and prestige and reputations at stake for this being quiet. And so if you're interested in that, and I'll just leave you with this. This is what I started with. Yeah, those are the websites. If you're interested in it, it's worthy of study, man. And I encourage you to buy the RSR tapes, those CDs. Get a year, pass it out as Christmas gifts. He is so funny. I was at a stoplight one time, and his co-host Fred Williams says, "Evolution's not a theory. You know, it's just a low-grade hypothesis." And Bob says, "It's not a low-grade hypothesis. It's a high-grade fever-induced delusion." And that's what I did. So I encourage you. That's the best $35 you'll live. And at that point, okay, I think we're done. All right. Thank you.